And now, ladies and gentlemen, what we would like to do is enter into a conversation about the index, the 2014 index. So you understand this exercise. The exercise is like taking a patient into the doctor's office for an annual physical exam. And we do a complete workup, right? It's like we get all the blood work done and testing the fluids and putting them onto the treadmill and getting the electrocardiograms. That's what the index is. And we do this, only in this case, the patient is Silicon Valley. And we've done a complete workup, and we're going to give you now the results of that battery of tests. We're going to talk about how our region is faring. And we do it across all of these different indicators. And we want you to know that, of course, you're holding the index in your hand, and it's in booklet form. But the index is so much more than that. The index is also living and breathing on its own suite of web pages. And we hope you'll take full advantage of those as well. It lives at siliconvalleyindex.org. And when you visit that site, the charts are actually interactive. You can go to any of the charts, you can click on them and pull up the underlying data. It will also link you to the source material, and it will have other interesting links as well. And so we hope that the index is a tool in your hands, not only today, but throughout the year, providing that analytical foundation for the deliberating and the decision-making that we are all doing in the course of our work, especially as we think about the region. The last thing I wanted to mention is that the index comes to you in a special partnership with Silicon Valley Community Foundation. We greatly value that partnership. It is a co-branded, co-published document. And my counterpart, my colleague and friend Emmett Carson, will be on the stage immediately following me to also talk to you about the index and the data that it contains. Now let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the index. The way you have to start is by understanding what Silicon Valley is. And the co-chair said, many people aren't sure what Silicon Valley is. None of us really are. It's a phenomenon. It's referring to a state of mind. It's not always referring to a place. In fact, arguments ensue about what's part of Silicon Valley and what's not. But when it comes down to this exercise of actually measuring, we finally do have to actually draw lines on a map. And so the way we've done it is that we have said Silicon Valley takes in 40 cities. Those 40 cities are all of the cities in Santa Clara County and San Mateo County. It also takes in a little part of Alameda County, and then it even includes Scotts Valley in Santa Cruz County. So that's how we have defined the region. However, San Francisco must also be included in this conversation. We all understand that. The phenomenon that we're describing of innovation, entrepreneurship, investment, job creation, clearly happening in San Francisco, having a transformative effect and the subject of much discussion. And so from our view, it doesn't make any sense to exclude San Francisco from these kinds of conversations, especially as the region comes to be integrated. And so many of the charts and figures will show you Silicon Valley as traditionally defined, and then it will have San Francisco added in. Many of the charts will have it all blended together. We've tried to be very clear in the documents and on the website how we're doing this. And as we go forward, we really do think of Silicon Valley as the pretty much the entire Bay Area, even with the technology phenomenon and entrepreneurship spreading well into the East Bay and having transformative effects in Oakland. So we'll be talking about that. That's how we define the region. And its definitional characteristics are laid out very clearly in the index, and you can refer to that. So the big question that everybody always wants to know is the economy productive? Is it firing? Is it creating new jobs and new opportunities? So I want to get right to that. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last calendar year, the Silicon Valley region, those 40 cities we defined, generated 46,000 new jobs. That's a very big number. When you add in San Francisco, there's another 22,000 jobs that were added in that south of Market area and beyond. When you add in the rest of Alameda County, including Oakland, now we have another 18,000 jobs. And then when you add in the rest of the Bay Area, all 9 counties that are touching the Bay, you get yourself another 15,000 jobs. That's our jobs picture. The grand total for the whole Bay Area, 104,000 new jobs generated in calendar year 2013. We need to put that in perspective. Yes, that's highly appropriate. Now, we need to understand this number. The highest number we ever saw, was 110,000. And that was during the height of the dot-com craze. And you remember that period. It's sort of embarrassing to look back on it now. We just spiked into that figure, 110,000. And then it was shown to be a bubble. And it came crashing immediately down. And it seems to have been a case of the engine overheating. What's so interesting about this number is that there's nothing spiky about it. It doesn't have the feeling of a bubble. This feels real. Why do I say that? Because we have grown into this number. We have now mounted 4 steady years of incremental growth in that range, 20,000, then 40,000, then another 40,000. Now here we are, the 4th solid year of that kind of growth. This feels like what we're going to be experiencing into the foreseeable future, this kind of steady job growth. And so it raises all kinds of questions. Are we prepared to integrate and accommodate that kind of growth? That's going to be a major question before us. By the way, the rate is 3.1%. That's the growth rate. The national average is 2%. So we're just heads above what's happening elsewhere. So the question that you have is, what's driving it? What is driving all of this growth? Well, if you're really interested, then you're going to love Appendix A, and we've broken it all down for you there. It's broken down by job category. I'll just highlight for you what we see is actually driving most of this growth. The biggest category for sure is the category called Internet and Information Services. So you know what this is. This is internet companies, this is social media, but it also includes the cloud and cloud storage. And it also includes mobile devices, software, the applications that support those mobile devices, security, those types of things. That's what's driving this growth. And it saw a 20% increase in the past calendar year. But then I want to make the next important point, which is this boom in that particular sector is also spreading into other sectors of the economy. And what's most striking, we think, about the index this year is that the growth really is distributed very much across the board. We're seeing it in utilities. We're seeing it in business services. We're seeing it in real estate, in management offices, construction. This is such an important indicator for any economy, certainly for ours, and you see it around you. Everywhere you turn, there's new construction happening. Pharmaceuticals is a growth area for the region. But the next biggest growth area after software and internet information services is this category we call business and administrative services, and that's a catch-all that brings in lawyers, accountants, executive search, accountancies, all of the rest of that, office management. So this is how our economy is growing. So then you might be interested to know if there are categories that are shrinking. And yes, there are, of course. Petroleum and chemical manufacturing is a shrinking sector in our region. So, interestingly, is instrument manufacturing, as we make this fundamental shift into internet, software, those kinds of things. It's also interesting to me that things like IT repair services, which has been a category of its own, is a shrinking category, 12% losses in that category. I think we know what's going on here. Our devices, our computers and our devices have become disposable. They're not things that we actually hold on to, and so that's affecting that sector. We're also seeing shrinkage in the government sector, state and federal, transportation. It's also interesting to point out that we had 3% losses in aerospace and defense. And I just pause on that because it's so interesting. Only 15, 20 years ago, that was the sector that characterized Silicon Valley. No longer the case. This is a very dynamic, constantly changing, brutally dynamic kind of region. So then, having reported out those kinds of figures, we're next most interested to talk about the innovative nature of our economy. That's, of course, our most striking feature, our most defining characteristic, that this is a land of entrepreneurs and innovators. And so we try to measure those aspects of the economy. Company formation, liquidity events, venture capital, all of those things that feed the innovation engine. So I'm going to throw up a couple of charts here. One would be patents. And ladies and gentlemen, last year we recorded the highest number ever. 15,000 patents were registered right out of Silicon Valley. That's an extraordinary figure. There is no other place on the face of the planet that can make this claim. 6 out of the top 10 patent-generating cities in the United States are Silicon Valley cities. So this is remarkable. Now, last year there was landmark legislation that changed patent law, and I'm referring specifically to the first-to-file rule. And we do not know how that is going to affect these numbers. But the numbers that you see precede that law. And so we'll be paying close attention over the coming year, and next year we'll see what kind of an impact that had on a chart such as this. Now, it's interesting to ask where the patents are coming from. And so it's clear that the biggest segment is that segment I highlighted. It's computers, it's data processing, it's information storage, it's software. That's what's happening. But we're also seeing a great deal of growth in communications, also in energy, electricity, heating, chemical processing technologies. This is where the bulk of the patent activity is. Let's say a quick word about venture capital. This is always seen as a leading indicator and a very telling sign about our region. Many people refer to it as our special sauce, and it is in fact the case that there is more venture capital generated in this region and spent in this region than any other place. And last year's figures only continued that trend. When I stood on this stage a year ago, I pointed out that venture capital had actually shrunk, and we were wondering if that was going to be a trend. Apparently not. We grew over the past 12 months. The absolute figure, if you want to know, is $12.1 billion. And those are not just sitting in funds I'm talking about. I'm talking about $12.1 billion that were actually invested in local companies. $12.1 billion, that's over $11 billion in the previous year. And then when you add San Francisco's numbers, that figure rises. And when you put Silicon Valley and San Francisco together, we're commanding more than 80% of all the venture capital in California. Nationally, we command close to 40% of all the venture capital in the country. So that's the kind of place this is. The important question is to ask, where is the venture capital going? Where are we investing? What do we see as those rising industries and the activity of tomorrow? Well, it's interesting to point out that it's going into software and also into biotechnology, media and entertainment, also medical devices and equipment. Those are the largest categories. But I want to talk for a minute about clean technology, because here at this conference, we have agendized that as a major question for our region. Will we be at the center, at the forefront of the clean technology revolution? Over the past 12 months, even going farther back, we have seen some flight from that sector. And many people have been actually writing it off, saying that that was just a flirtation and that activity now in that sector is going to dry up. And true enough, you can see that there was that enormous spike in 2008 when about $2 billion flooded into that segment, more than $2 billion actually, and then it's dropped. But what's interesting is that over the past 12 months, we actually saw a rise in the clean tech sector, that it's actually growing again. Now, the size of the pie has shrunk, but it's starting to grow again. And even as that pie shrinks, it is interesting to note that Silicon Valley continues to command larger and larger shares of the clean technology investments. And so we just wanted to point that out. We also think it's really interesting that the composition of those investments has changed. Back in 2008, at the height, most of that investment was going into solar. And today that's not the case. Only 10% of it is going into solar, and the rest is going into energy efficiency, it's going into biofuel, biochemicals, it's going into hydrogen, it's going into fuel cells, energy storage. That's the changing picture in clean technology. Let's talk for a bit about initial public offerings. Many people see this as a very important indicator of our overall health and dynamism as an entrepreneurial economy. And of course, those liquidity events are hugely important to the venture capital community and the returns that they're forecasting on their investments. So we had 20 IPOs over the past calendar year. And I think it's very interesting to look at where they were coming from, what kinds of sectors, what kinds of industries. You might think that they were all coming out of social media and the internet in that space, when in fact, it looks like they're coming out of biotechnology. Pharma is heavily represented. They're also in storage and cloud. And then they're also very much in marketing and advertising and business services. And then finally, you have some internet-based companies. So that's the IPO picture. Last year, we had 17 IPOs. This year, we had 20 IPOs. The nation overall had 200 IPOs. So Silicon Valley commands 10% of our nation's IPOs over the past calendar year. I'd also like to point out that mergers and acquisitions is very much a thing that characterizes Silicon Valley. When you put Silicon Valley and San Francisco, when you put it all together, it looks like we're commanding about 43% of all of the deals going on in California. And we command about 10% of all M&A activity in the nation overall. So those are really healthy shares. No other region can make that kind of claim. I also just think it's interesting to point out that San Francisco-based companies are the biggest target right now for this kind of M&A activity. So that's an interesting development. Another indicator of the strength or the energy or the activity of an economy is, of course, space, commercial space. And so we'll talk about commercial real estate for just a second. I'll just point out that we had an enormous spike back during the dot-com. You saw all kinds of R&D facilities constructed and developed, and you also saw all the rest, office and industrial and warehouse, and we have not recovered. However, in Santa Clara County alone, we had the highest number recorded this year. We developed about 2 million square feet in Santa Clara County alone, and that's of office space. R&D hasn't come back yet, but the others are, industrial and warehouse. And the average rents for those spaces is also increasing, actually increasing dramatically. We'll say something about that in a minute. I also want to point out that home sales have taken off. We saw a 27% jump in home sales in the region as we've defined it. And of course, the cost of our housing continues to rise. I don't know if you're interested to know, but as of December 31st on Zillow, we learned that the median priced home in San Mateo County is $831,000. Good grief. Unbelievable number. In Santa Clara County, it's slightly less, $737,000. Those are the median priced homes. Those are single family homes. I want to say something about earnings, about income, because income, of course, is probably the most important measure of community health. So I just want to put this number in front of you. It's an amazing number. It's average annual earnings. So the way we get this number is we just take all of the salary that is paid out to the workforce in our region and then divide it by the total number of salaried people. And the number you get for Silicon Valley is $107,000. That's the average annual earnings. So can we put that in relief? Can we put that in stark relief? The figure for California as a state is $68,000. The figure for the United States is $60,000. I mean, look at us, just off the charts in terms of average annual earnings. There really is something to this notion that Silicon Valley is a place where you can pursue a path to prosperity. But we're going to say more about that in a minute. We also think it's very important to report out median income. Median is probably a better measure than averages because we have so many high earners in Silicon Valley that skews the average. So we also report median. And remember, median is when it's half the people are earning more than that amount and half the people are earning less than that amount. So if you're curious, median income in Silicon Valley is $90,000. That's where our break point is, $90,000. And the national figures are also on the chart, much lower, in the $60,000 range. Now, I think what's also most interesting about this chart is to show you that for several years running, median income had been falling. And we had been reporting that out at this event as a danger sign. In this past year, it actually rose. It rose a few percentage points. So maybe that's good news. We're not sure. It's hard to tell if this is a trend. We just don't know. And we'll be talking about this at some length today. But nevertheless, those are the facts. So, ladies and gentlemen, having looked at all of this, I think there is a single conclusion assailing us, and this is it. This is a very hot economy. You've seen in terms of jobs and the innovative nature and the IPOs and commercial activity and the economic growth and the patents and all of the rest of it. This is a sizzling economy. Not only that, I think that it's entirely possible that it's going to get even hotter. Why would I say that? Well, I see at least three things going on. One is that we haven't even seen the advent yet of the Internet of Things, which people are forecasting is going to be like billions and billions of dollars of economic activity, especially as it moves into areas like vehicle-to-vehicle communication, and then all of the devices in our homes and in our workplaces completely wired and connected. Silicon Valley is poised to compete in that area like no other place. Then, as I'm thinking about hardware and manufacturing, it would seem that we're also going to have a leg up on that, and that it's going to make a return to this valley, especially as we talk about 3D printing and boutique manufacturing, and the trends in manufacturing where it has this intensive IT component to it. And then also, as you talk about rising wages in these offshore locations, especially in Asia, as they develop out a middle class, it's going to change that dynamic and make, we think, Silicon Valley a very welcoming place for those kinds of hardware and manufacturing activities. And then encryption and security is also an area that's going to be so enormous for our valley as this becomes a huge priority. Anybody shopped at Target lately? You know what I'm talking about. And Silicon Valley companies are poised more than ever to take advantage of those opportunities. So I think it's a responsible statement to say that this is a very hot economy and it's probably going to get even hotter. So having said that, I want to conclude my remarks by saying, what here could possibly make us uneasy? Is there anything here not to like? And we have a few remarks about that as well. One would be, again, to take a look at income averages, but also income distribution. And so we'll just point out a fascinating trend. In Silicon Valley, we are seeing the constant, ongoing erosion of our middle class. Please understand, 25 years ago, this was not the case. Silicon Valley was a middle-class economy. We were mostly characterized by creating those mid-range professions. Today, we've become the classic hourglass economy. Some people call it the barbell economy. There it is, in stark relief. As you look at the middle segment, people that are earning between $35,000 and $100,000 a year, every year we're losing percentage points from that group. And every year we're also seeing the top segment, people that are earning more than $100,000 a year, grow. We're seeing that segment grow. Now, what we cannot tell you is that that growth in the top is taking place because there's a ladder and people are climbing the ladder and moving into that segment. Nothing in our data can make that conclusion. We think it's possible, but we think it's also equally possible that Silicon Valley is such a costly, expensive, brutal place that there's a threshold there's a gate, and the only people that can enter into this kind of economy are the people that are already high earners, and they come here, especially from foreign places, and they populate out these high-skilled professions that were proliferating. Meanwhile, our bottom segment, and now even our middle segment, stagnating. This is a very striking feature of our economy. And then, if you're interested, we break it down by race and ethnicity, and it's very striking. Persistent disparities by race, and the gap is wider than it has ever been. It's not only that there's a gap. The gap has been there for a while. What's most striking, concerning, is that the gap is widening. There's a 70% difference. The lowest earning segment of our community is earning 70% less than the highest earning segment by race. That's the kind of community that we live in. So we'll be talking today about those trends as well, and what kind of strategies might be available to a region such as ours so that we can see growth in all of the segments, and that this prosperity could possibly be more widely shared. Let me put this in another perspective. Housing continues to be our Achilles heel. It is such a difficult problem for our region. So I told you about median prices. This is the median price home, and this is all kinds of homes, condos, townhouses, single-family homes. That's your median price in the region overall. Well, if that's your price, and you need 20% for a down payment, that's what you have to come up with. Staggering number. And then we reported that median income is $90,000. So the question is, can you afford a home at the median income in Silicon Valley? Well, there's what your monthly payment is going to be. If that's your monthly payment, that means that you're spending about half of your earnings on housing alone. Half of your earnings. Now, the recommended figure is 28%. That's considered in the safety range. So Silicon Valley is an inhospitable place to the home buyer. 40% of first-time home buyers in Silicon Valley are able to afford the median price home. It's staggering. This is a very difficult problem. This, by the way, breaks down home affordability. We're the most expensive place in the state, more expensive than Los Angeles, more expensive than Santa Barbara, than San Diego. So then you ask, is it better to rent? Should we just be a region of renters? Well, bad news there too. Rents increased $1,500 over the past year on an annual basis. So all of us are paying about $1,500 more in rent. And that is not keeping pace with income. So income's also rising, but they're not rising that much. And so we're actually losing ground in Silicon Valley. So what's interesting is that this is what's happening. People are moving in with their parents. Lots of two-generation homes, but also three-generation homes. 5% of us are living in three-generation homes, and that figure is also growing. This is the kind of place we live in. Here's another thing that's so interesting about the housing conundrum. We actually recorded the highest number of units permitted in a long time. 8,000 units were permitted and will be under construction. That's a healthy number. It's more than we've done. We used to be down in the 2,000 range. So 8,000. Should we congratulate ourselves? Well, ladies and gentlemen, in the last year, 33,000 people moved into our region. And so these trends just continue. That pressure on prices is not going to be abated. And this is one of the biggest head scratchers for our region as we try to figure out how we're going to grow together. The last thing I'm going to say before leaving the stage is that we have another set of problems, and that's just managing the growth. As we grow, will we be able to provide the kinds of infrastructure that is required for this kind of population base? And as you look around you, you know the answer. We have creaking infrastructure. Caltrain is working so hard to go up and down the peninsula. It carries 49,000 daily riders. That was a 10% increase over the last year. And it's doing everything it can, and yet it's maxed. That system completely maxed. It doesn't have room to grow until we make major investments in electrification and all of the rest. The other systems, VTA, working so hard, and it's seeing some rise in its bus service. They're seeing some uptick even in the light rail service, and yet, for the most part, those are not services that are being widely used. They're not viewed as effective enough or getting you exactly where you need to be. And so we have a problem. We have a real infrastructure problem, and a tax system that's not exactly working for us, making it very difficult to invest in the kind of infrastructure that world-class companies and world-class people need to have a real thriving region. So this continues to be a problem. By the way, 75% of us continue to drive alone to work every day. That's the kind of region that we are. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, there's some facts and figures for you to contemplate. We want you to know that besides this, there are dozens and dozens of other indicators in this index. Interesting things: water consumption, electricity consumption, mercury levels in the bay, how our third graders are performing on standardized reading tests. It's all there, and we want it to be a living, breathing document and resource to you throughout the year as you contemplate these kinds of questions. But now I'm going to bring to the stage my colleague, my friend, Emmett Carson, and he is now going to talk about some of the figures that we've put on the board today from the standpoint of our region's challenges and opportunities. He's the CEO and president of Silicon Valley Community Foundation, Emmett Carson.
Good morning. Oh, you can do better than that. It's not that early. Good morning. That's much better. Thank you. And as always, Russ does a phenomenal job in presenting a lot of information in rapid fire. And as he indicated, the role of the index is to provide a doctor's report. And you get all of those stats and all of those numbers, and there are more in the book. But at some point, you ask the doctor, what does it all mean? And the doctor says, well, you know, you got to lose 20 pounds, and you've got to stop eating so much fried food, and you seem a little stressed out, and you need to take some quality time for yourself. So this is the part where I want to offer at least one opinion about what that summary looks like at the doctor's office. And I think it's an important set of observations for our community, but also for the nation. Across the United States, there is growing concern and discussion about what's called the widening income inequality gap between the wealthiest Americans and everyone else. Silicon Valley, as Russ indicated, is becoming a microcosm for this debate. And I think that there is much that can be learned by looking at our own ecosystem. As Russ said, we have had over 4 years of job growth. We have the largest share of the nation's high-growth, high-wage employment sectors, and we are one of the highest income regions in the country. What that all says is that notwithstanding that economic success, we still have income inequality. It says that economic success alone is not enough. Rising tides do not lift all boats. It means that to address income inequality, we have to have intentional public policy. It just doesn't happen because the market is growing. It happens because a community, a region comes together and says, we've got to be intentional about it. It also says that the problem and the challenge we face is not about some are being successful. It's not the issue. We ought to celebrate that people are being enormously economically successful. The problem that the data indicates is that there is not enough opportunity for those at the bottom. And that's what we have to be intentional about. There are 3 things that I think we can do. There are others, but at least 3 things that I think we can do that we have to address. First, we've got to look at the demand, this mismatch around housing that Russ talked about. In the last year, some nearly less than 8,000 new units of housing available to meet the need of 33,000 100,000 new residents. Just doesn't work. The market by itself won't fix that. And we've got a couple of choices here, right? Either we grow out and we challenge assumptions about open space. Either we grow up and we challenge some of the zoning laws that restrict the height of apartments and other buildings, or we inevitably see prices rise. It's just how it works. It's just how it works. And if those prices continue to rise, the people at the bottom are earning the lowest share of income. Either they double up in housing, which violates many renting laws, right? They move further out, which adds to their transportation costs on a limited budget and adds to congestion in the region. Or they take a larger share, as Russ's example indicated, of their already limited income to try to find housing. And why that's important is a vibrant, healthy economy has to have housing for everyone who lives in that community. The bus drivers need a place to live. The school teachers need a place to live. The paramedics need a place to live. For all the jobs in the economy, there needs to be a place for those people to live. And just having economic success alone is not going to fix that. We have to be intentional. What's the second issue? We desperately need to improve educational outcomes in Silicon Valley. We are failing our youngest students. 20%, 1/5 of all white third graders read below proficiency. 1/5 of white third graders. 56% of African American third graders and 66% of Latino third graders read below proficiency here in Silicon Valley. In part because of that reading gap, only half of all Silicon Valley public high school students graduate with the necessary courses to go to a 4-year college. Only half here in Silicon Valley. Barely 30% of the Valley's Pacific Islanders and African Americans graduate with the courses necessary to go to a 4-year college. Economic growth alone won't fix that problem. It's been existing and growing over the last 4 years of our economic success. We need intentional public policy. What can we do? Well, there's several bills pending in the state legislature for pre-K schooling that can help address literacy. In San Mateo County, there is an ambitious public-private partnership called the Big Lift, focused on reading literacy. We have to be intentional about our efforts in education. Thirdly, we really have to go after this issue of income inequalities and disparity in pay. Silicon Valley prides itself about being a meritocracy. That's what we say. And yet, women who have a bachelor's degree or more in this community earn 40 to 73% less than men with the same educational credentials. How does that happen? Rising tides won't fix that. Every company here needs to commit to go back and look at their HR policies to say we need to pay equal pay for equal work. That's the only way that gets fixed, right? The economy won't fix that. Intentional action has to fix that. And then as Russ talked about, our lowest earning groups, in particular African Americans and Latinos, earn 70% less than the highest performing racial groups. The economy by itself won't fix that. They have to take a larger share of a limited income for housing and transportation. We need to be intentional. One of the easiest things we can do is the Earned Income Tax Credit. It already exists. It rewards work. Again, at many companies today, there are employees who would qualify. How do we get the company's HR departments to say, do you qualify for the Earned Income Tax Credit for their employees at the lowest categories? It's already there. It rewards work. We ought to take advantage of it in our high-cost community. Let me close by, you can clap, it's good. I like that. It's easy to do. Not the clapping, the Earned Income Tax Credit. We are a model for job growth and economic success. We must now become a model for how we constructively reduce income inequality. If we can't do it here in Silicon Valley, then it can't be done, and we do everything else. We can do this. Thank you very much.